Okay, so I wanted to talk about my project a little bit. This one is a lot newer and came out pretty recently, this month actually. And the reason I wanted to make a presentation for it is because the project was actually pretty big. Since you'll find out eventually, but anyways, I wanted to talk about this new Python library that um, is the next generation DNS resolver. Before I begin this presentation, I wanted to point out that um, my current part-time job, even though I'm off work because the building's being rebuilt, it might not allow me to actually go and attend any events anytime soon, which hence why I'm making this presentation virtually. And if you do hear anything in the background, it's because I'm trying to muffle out a very large and disrespectful kitchen that sits literally right next to my wall. It's like on the other, just directly on the other side. But anyways, I'll continue. So, because like I had explained before, that the building I work at is being rebuilt, I had a bit of more free time on hand, which meant I could come back to doing things again. So, with that free time, I decided to do ethical things with my time. And one of those things I wanted to do mainly revolves around AIO HTTP and all of its core components and sub-libraries, as I'm going to call them, or smaller libraries that sometimes people also use externally for other things. But some of those contributions are the revival of AO Signal, prop catches, new null check. There's actually a lot bigger optimization in the 3.3 update. It should be out soon, if not now. But it basically, I got rid of rich object comparisons with that library in the cython portion of the code. So now there's no more need for global objects, and prop cache could now theoretically be thread safe if used correctly. There's an upcoming multi-dict C API that me and this. Okay, so this is a I guess an edit. But I didn't want to butcher anybody's names that I didn't have written in here. But me and Avest Love were trying to work on the new multi-dict C API, and for the AO threading release, the other author is X420005 ELF. But we've been working on that project for about a month, and I'll explain this later, but whenever I'm not working on that project, I'm working over here. There's also more wind loop wheels now, and that's thanks to the pycares workflow that I'm borrowing, because I needed a new workflow, because the one I was using was actually completely deprecated and no longer worked the way it used to. But now that I've added Dependabot to that workflow as well, there should be improved stuff, and we also accomplished the goal of having nightly builds and pull requests workflows. So WinLoop now has those, so that contributing is a lot easier, and it's a lot simpler than it was years prior. And now that I have a lot more skills with using the Git command line, it actually made things a lot easier for me to contribute to projects. So that's something also to point out. And there's also a new release with AO threading as well, which is pretty nice. And I added one new library called deprecated params, which is meant to deprecate keyword parameters that a developer doesn't want to use anymore. And then I've also contributed a bit to pycares whenever I find something that I can add over there that is also in my project over here. But anyways, enough of me talking about other projects. Something just didn't feel right to me when I was using pycares. And after, toying around a bit with AO DNS or like hooking up to an email server or whatnot, I sort of figured out that when I was going to shut down a script, it wouldn't shut down. There was always a lingering thread, and that's when I learned about the free after release vulnerability that could have triggered arbitrary code execution or seg faults, which is actually pretty terrifying. And after seeing the clunkiness of that project and the amount of years that it has gone through, if I felt like I could improve upon it, if not completely rewrite it with a better system, which is why I chose Cython, because I've actually done a lot of Cython projects before, so moving CFFI to Cython just felt and made sense to me. So, like any good developer, I decided to rewrite the project to celebrate the 5.00 release that could be coming out anytime now. Because just like the problems with the HTTP parser, it was rewritten, and LLHTTP is the newest generation of it. The same analogy could be said with my own library. Since I've gone in and rewritten everything and all the code, there was a bunch of changes I had to make, and some of them were at times maybe a little confusing, but eventually things just started to click with me, and I started to realize that I could just move chunks and pieces of pycares' code over and then basically re-edit it to fit with Cython's standards. And at the same time, I also added in concurrent of future objects to handle these callbacks, and also to not need to have to use a separate thread to clean up a channel object, because that can be pretty terrible. But the new strategy revolves around creating handles, and basically in order for a channel to delete itself, it cannot be carrying any handles, which is what it waits on. And after that cleanup happens, it itself can be cleaned up, and it makes it so that ours destroy is as thread safe as possible, because let's be real, ours is destroy function is not thread safe. So because I was able to swap to using handles, callbacks are now optional, which should be less annoying to some users. And because I made that change, future objects could now be chained to a sync IO, and therefore I could create my own AO DNS resolver, which I have actually made a separate module for under the name AIO. And another change I made too was that I decided to implement the message specs way of grabbing a buffer which it could also grab a string object too, which normally buffers can't grab those objects, but it had an implementation where it could, so I'm borrowing from it. But because I made that change, you can now use bytes, byte arrays, memory views, etc. And you could also use DNS URLs now because I updated a few functions to allow you to use like URLs and stuff. Maybe I'll add URL in the future, who knows. But in the future, I am actually planning to do all these things. And if anyone wants to, use cythons, you can. I would currently say the project's in its beta phase, but hopefully it'll start to mature. And I'll say that it's like development ready. I'm hoping when it's development ready that I'll create another module that we can use for creating an abstract DNS resolver for AO HTTP, which I think would be nice. But I have not been able to do any performance checks yet because I'm trying to look for a DNS server that I could run a workflow in and that doesn't DDoS like one of Google's DNS servers or whatnot, because honestly I don't want to give them that pain, and at the same time I want to benchmark pycares and cythons together, and as well as stress test them safely. But hopefully in the future though we'll start migrating some of the deprecated CRs functions, but that might be wishful thinking, but we'll see. But I kept some of them in for now in case those that want to migrate from pycares or not wants to use my project instead. But I decided to make them separate, like how cycurl and curl CFFI work. So you could pick and choose which one you want for time being. But maybe in the future I'll have to read the docs.io page for cythons. But anyways, that was it for everything. I want to thank Saggle for inspiring my project to begin with. I want to thank BDraco for providing me tips and feedback on Matrix. And the logo up here, I made that in a paint.net if anyone was curious. And here's the project link on PyPI, and here's the link on GitHub. Anyways, that is it for my short presentation on this project. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.